What if I told you that the stories we've been calling mythology might actually be fragments of forgotten history? That the ancient tales of Rama, Krishna, Dwarka, and Mahabharata could be far more than symbolic legends, that they may echo real events buried in time? Welcome to Hinduism Unveiled. Today, we ask one of the most controversial and fascinating questions in world history. Is Hinduism mythology or is it history? Because while many call it the world's oldest mythological tradition, the evidence, archaeological, textual, and astronomical, may tell a different story. So stay till the end as we separate poetic allegory from tangible proof and uncover how the line between myth and history may not be as clear as you think. For centuries, Hinduism has been labeled as mythology by Western academia. Why? Because its sacred stories, the Mahabharata, Ramayan, and Puranas, blend gods, miracles, and cosmic events on a scale that defies modern logic. But here's the problem. The word mythology itself comes from a Western lens, specifically from Greek tradition, where myths were considered imaginative tales used to explain nature, not history. When British and European scholars first encountered India in the 18th and 19th centuries, they applied the same label to its scriptures, assuming that anything containing the divine or supernatural must be symbolic, not factual. But in Hindu thought, the line between the spiritual and the historical isn't that simple. In Sanatana Dharma, divine presence doesn't invalidate reality, it sanctifies it. Unlike most ancient civilizations that measured time in centuries, Hindu cosmology measures it in cycles of creation, yugas, that span millions of years. The idea that humanity and civilization existed long before recorded history isn't fantasy, it's foundational to Hindu thought. The scriptures describe not a single linear history, but a cosmic continuum, where each yuga, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali represents a phase in humanity's spiritual evolution. So when texts mention events like the Mahabharata war happening over 5,000 years ago, or Rama's reign thousands of years before that, they are referencing a grand cosmic chronology that dwarfs the Western timeline. For thousands of years, these were preserved not as myths, but as itihasa, a Sanskrit word that literally means that which indeed happened. Now, let's turn to the evidence, starting with archaeology. For centuries, Krishna's city of Dwarka was dismissed as legend. But in the 1980 seconds and 1990 seconds, marine archaeologists discovered the submerged remains of an ancient city off the coast of Gujarat with walls, streets, and structures dating back over 9,000 years. Artifacts found there, pottery, anchors, and tools predate known urban civilizations, suggesting that the descriptions in the Mahabharata of a grand coastal city that sank beneath the waves may have a historical core. Ancient Vedic texts mention the mighty Saraswati river, described as surpassing all rivers. For centuries, its existence was doubted until satellite imagery revealed the dry bed of a massive river system running parallel to the Indus, matching Vedic geography exactly. Sediment analysis places its flow between 8000 and 3000 BCE, overlapping with the era of the Rig Veda. This means the oldest Vedic hymns may describe a real geographic landscape, not mythic invention. When the Indus Valley civilization was first excavated, scholars were puzzled by its sophistication, grid-planned cities, sanitation systems, and fire altars. Modern research now increasingly links this civilization to the early Vedic culture, suggesting continuity rather than separation. Taken together, these discoveries indicate that the epics weren't born from pure imagination. They were anchored in a living geography and a tangible past. The Mahabharata and Ramayana are not written as fantasy, they're structured as historical chronicles. Each begins with meticulous genealogies, political maps, and astronomical data. They describe battles, dynasties, trade routes, and even administrative systems, not in metaphor, but in detail. In the Mahabharata, 18 armies assemble for war, with named kingdoms that match archaeological regions in northern India. In the Ramayana, the descriptions of Ayodhya, Kishkinda, and Lanka align strikingly with archaeological sites in Uttar Pradesh, Hampi, and Sri Lanka. For instance, the Ram Setu, the legendary bridge built by Rama's army, corresponds to a natural limestone causeway between India and Sri Lanka. NASA's satellite imagery confirms it's an ancient, man-made or modified structure that may date back thousands of years. Even the ancient city plans like Ayodhya's square geometry align with the Vastu Shastra principles described in Vedic texts. This isn't random mythology, it's cultural memory encoded in sacred narrative. Perhaps the most mind-blowing evidence comes not from the earth, but from the stars. Ancient Indian texts often timestamp events using astronomical alignments, descriptions of planetary positions, lunar phases, and eclipses. Modern software that simulates historical star maps allows researchers to decode these references. For example, the Mahabharata describes a solar eclipse and planetary alignments before the Kurukshetra war. Astronomical back calculations date this event to around 3067 BCE. The Ramayana mentions specific positions of Jupiter and Saturn during Rama's exile, matching 5114 BCE. While not definitive proof, these correlations show that the epics reference real celestial phenomena observed by real people, not pure allegory. Another key factor often ignored is civilizational continuity. Unlike most ancient cultures that vanished, the civilization that produced the Vedas is still alive today. The rituals, mantras, and festivals practiced in India have been passed down in unbroken oral and cultural traditions for over 5,000 years. When a priest chants from the Rig Veda or a devotee lights a lamp to Vishnu, they are participating in the same continuum of practice that once shaped the world of Rama and Krishna. This living continuity itself is historical evidence, a lineage of culture too vast to fit into the Western concept of mythology. Now, to be fair, not everything in the epics must be taken as literal history. The sages of ancient India encoded philosophical truths within their stories, layers of symbolism describing cosmic and moral realities as much as physical events. For instance, the war of Kurukshetra is both a literal conflict and a metaphor for the eternal battle between dharma and adharma within every human being. But to call the entire tradition myth misses the point entirely. Because Hindu thought never separated myth from truth, it saw myth as a vehicle for truth. In other words, these are not made-up stories. They are symbolic retellings of events infused with spiritual insight where history and philosophy meet. For nearly 2 centuries, colonial and Western historians framed Hinduism as primitive mythology, while their own biblical narratives were treated as history. But today, Indian and global scholars are revisiting this assumption, combining archaeology, genetics, and textual study to rebuild an indigenous understanding of Indian civilization. And what's emerging is clear, that the people who composed the Vedas built cities along the Saraswati and preserved. The epics were not mythical, they were part of an unbroken civilizational continuum stretching back to prehistory. To call it mythology is to mistake its poetic language for falsehood and to underestimate one of humanity's oldest living traditions. So, is Hinduism mythology or history? The answer is it's both, and more. It's history, remembered a sacred story. It's myth that encodes memory. It's philosophy that explains the universe in narrative form. While the West separated history and spirituality, Hinduism wove them together, showing that the outer world and the inner world are reflections of the same truth. So perhaps the real question isn't whether Hinduism is myth or history, but whether we're ready to see that myth can be history and that truth may sometimes wear the robes of poetry. Because the deeper you look, the more it becomes clear. The story of Hinduism is the story of humanity itself, ancient, eternal, and still unfolding. If you enjoyed this exploration, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Hinduism Unveiled. Join us next time as we uncover the hidden truths of Sanatan Dharma and reveal how ancient wisdom continues to shape our modern world. Until then, Namaste, Jai Shri Rama, Jai Shri Krishna.